Okay, hopefully we've got it recording.
Okay.
So let's see how we do.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today. We really are very glad that you are here. We sat back and really tried to organize what we've got going today based upon what the field would need. And hopefully you'll find this to be a really good use of your time, because we went back and really have been looking at what it is that people may need as we move forward with the COVID crisis, and especially with preschool special education. So we tried to organize it as well in a way that we're going to get to what you need first, and then we're going to provide you some resources as we go on. But here's kind of how we've got it organized at this point. We're welcoming you to Zoom right now, but we're going to go over some of the latest stuff from the U.S. Department of Education. And the reason we're doing that is we thought, well, maybe we can push this to the background, but we really couldn't, because we all know that IDA is really driving the bus for us, as long as we're talking about bus analogies, and that we're waiting for a lot of things coming from them as well. And then we're going to talk about the latest information that has just come out from OS, and hopefully most of you have seen that. It came out on April the 10th. So we'll talk a little bit about that piece as well, and the guidance that we have around that. And if we have time, we'd like to talk about Michigan and national web resources that you can use as we move forward with this work. Last thing we'll do is next steps. And then what we'd like you to do during this whole time is, as you have questions, because I think we've got so much information, I think if we try to stop and take each question, we're not going to get through what we have, but your questions are super important because you are actually the people out in the field. And so we'd like you to make sure that you put those questions in the chat box. And then we'll record everything in the chat box, or we'll actually save it, and we'll try to address those with you at a later time. So hopefully that will work for you. And I guess I'll turn this piece over to Nancy, just to kind of talk a little bit about that, but I think I've talked about most of those already, have I not?
I think you have, Mark, but I'll run through them real quick. So my name is Nancy Silbergoins. I'm the training manager at the Office of Innovative Projects. Again, I echo what Mark had said in welcoming you all here today. We are going to ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking, which will be for the majority of the call. We have 65 people on the call today, and it's hard to have a conversation with 66 people in a virtual way. So we are going to ask that you mute yourselves and type your questions in the chat. We will be saving the chat, everything that's in the chat in a document, and filtering out the questions, and either taking them up to MDE, or if there are things that we can answer, putting those answers together and providing those to you. This call is being recorded, so it will be available for you to reference in the future. And like I said earlier, we'll be summarizing the questions for all the slides after the call. And again, I will remind you to please mute yourself, because we do have a lot of people on the call, and we have a lot of information that we'd like to share. So Leanne is asking a question before we even get started, does ECSE fall under the K-12 special education guidance from MDE, or are we falling under OGS? That's a great question, Leanne. I think through our webinar today, you will get that answer and many more. So I'm gonna turn it back over. I think I'm turning it over. Mark, what's our next slide?
Well,
okay. All right. Well, I introduced myself, so I will turn it over to Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Wazak, the 619 coordinator in the Office of Great Start in the Michigan Department of Education. Turn it back to Mark.
And my name is Mark Kuipers, preschool special education content specialist and statewide training. And I was already smiling because I said to Nancy, well, the next slide will be yours. And then I did what I always do, and Jean and many of my colleagues that I work with, and many of the ISDs in which I presented, know that unless you turn me off, I tend to talk over top of other people. So today you can actually rate me at the end and say, did Mark actually share this time and space with his colleagues? I'm really going to try hard to do that. So here's the piece that I think, as I've been talking to people in different districts, and as we all have been talking to people in different districts, I think we're all clamoring for guidance. And I think that is where we are wanting to go. But I think really our charge, and this has been really clear through everything that's come down federally and through the state of Michigan, that really we are in uncharted waters right now, unprecedented times, whatever they want to call it, and that this is one of those times where if you put your priorities right, you're probably going to do it right. And the first thing we have to be concerned about is the safety of students and providers. Then we need to be really focused on students and families and make our best efforts. Right now, there really isn't a roadmap, is there? I mean, we can't go back to our rules and regs and go, I know exactly what to do. And so I think this is one of those times where as we work through all this and start working together, thinking about in terms of feasibility, flexibility, and FAPE to the greatest extent possible. Lisa and I were on a call the other day, and they were talking about COVID FAPE. And they said FAPE in the times of COVID. But really, FAPE for a child in our state is being defined as what their IEP is outlining. FAPE is their IEP. What we do during these times is our best effort, our good faith effort of providing FAPE to a student, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so with those thoughts in mind, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Lisa at this point, just to give us a little bit of thinking on where we're at federally with all this information, and then we'll get back to what's Michigan telling us specifically for kids in preschool special education, right?
So what Michigan is doing, as well as every other state, is we're waiting for federal guidance when it comes to special education through the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP. There have been a couple of memos that have been put out that you see here. First is addressing the risk of COVID-19. And this is really while protecting the child's student's civil rights. And this was dated back in March 16th of 2020. Shortly thereafter, they put out a supplemental fact sheet addressing the risk of COVID in preschool, elementary, and secondary schools while we're serving children at times with the highest needs with disabilities. And that was put March 21st. All the hyperlinks will be available to these documents. These documents, if I'm not mistaken, and Nancy or Mark correct me, that they are also on EOTTA's website under 619, correct?
This is correct.
Okay, and then we'll show you where to navigate to find those resources later on in the presentation. So in looking at the March 16th memo that came out of US Department of Ed, they, at this point in time, this is when COVID, and we want to kind of give you the history of how we got to where we are now, from both the federal perspective as well as the state perspective. Back when Michigan, for those of you who recall, were one of the first states to close statewide all of our classrooms. So what Department of Ed had said at the national level is if schools are closed to the general student population, then these are what's not required. You don't have to provide services for children with disabilities because you're not providing them for children who do not have an IEP. If a child with a disability does not receive services for an extended period, all right, someone say that word for me.
Compensatory?
Thank you. Services are determined individually to make up for any lost time. You do not have to hold your IEPs in person. And if you have a state face-to-face evaluation, you can be delayed until the school's open. This is still relevant because as of right now, there's still some schools in Michigan that have not gone through the process or completed the process that they have until plans have to be put in place by April 28th for the continuity of learning plan. So there could possibly still be some schools in Michigan that are closed, even though there's the expectation to open them. So this could still be something applicable at this point in time. Okay, next slide. Now, same memo comes out and says, but if schools are open, then every child has the right to education, including those with disabilities, and they should be receiving FAPE. And in order to do that, we need to look and think outside of the box and look at alternate and additional methods in getting these services to children. And in the third line saying, if a child with an IEP is home or advised to be home for an extended period due to COVID, provisions should be made for educational services. And we'll talk about this more in depth with regards to data collection when it comes a little later in this presentation. The second memo that came out March 21st is talking about some of the here's just some facts in helping addressing the risk. One is that the federal disability law, IDEA, does not present an insurmountable barriers to remote education. The department will offer flexibility where possible, and they're still trying to get a handle of that on themselves. And then FAPE may include special education and related services through distance instruction provided virtually, online, or on the telephone.
Okay. So as we go forward together, Lisa and I have been on many calls with National TA, and we really would encourage you, and that's why we're asking you to use the chat box as well, to let us know of things that we can take up to that level to have conversations, because they're asking continually, and ECTA is one of the grant recipients that is actually managing this. But those working at ECTA are actually saying, please let us know what's going on in Michigan. Please let us know what's going on in any other state, because we want to be able to take those questions. They are actually funneling those questions up to OSEP. So we will get guidance faster if we can be more targeted in our questions. So that's what makes it so incredibly important that you today type your questions into chat, email us after. There we go.
And
are we back?
You're back.
You're back. We did have a suggestion in the chat that maybe some people turn their videos off, because it might be easier for us to hear Mark with the streaming. So since this is a PowerPoint call, I will ask that people turn their videos off to make that a little easier. And then Mark, if you want to go back to sharing your screen, and we'll see if we can do this again.
Okay, let me see if I can get there. Something kind of crashed there, didn't it?
This happens. I mean, it's gonna roll with it.
And thanks everyone for so quickly turning off your videos. We appreciate that.
Hard time getting back there now.
So while Mark is navigating the PowerPoint back up, I'll pick up where he left off in saying that both Mark and I are on these OSEP National TA calls, and they're being held every Wednesday at 4 p.m. What we as states are doing is we're collecting questions that we have to, one, try to get national guidance on, to then help inform state guidance when we're able to provide that. So the questions in the chat that we don't have addressed in our PowerPoint today, Mark and I will be taking those to our next TA call on Wednesday of next Wednesday at 4.
Right.
And then we'll have, again, we may not get the guidance on that call because they then take it up the food chain to OSEP as need be, and then looking for guidance from the federal level.
Okay, are you able to see my screen again?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, we're up and running again. See, I told you didn't want me to drive the bus. We hit the curb the first time.
We're good.
All right, this is you too, Lisa.
Yes. So what we have here is, and I'm sorry, give me a second because my pictures on my Zoom are large, so I'm trying to make us smaller. All right, got it. I'm literally going to read this verbatim, even though it's on your screen. There is a website that has all the MDE COVID educational and informational resources. This is separate from what's going to be posted on EOTTA, even though there would also be a link from EOTTA's website under the 619 tab over to the MDE website. But at Department of Ed, the Office of Great Start is awaiting further guidance from the Governor's Office regarding Executive Order 2020-35 related to early childhood programs. MDE is therefore unable to provide additional guidance or answer specific questions related to early childhood programs related to early on or early childhood special education at this time. We are in the process of developing several pieces of guidance and FAQs that will be released once direction is received from the Governor's Office. So this goes back to Leanne's question in the beginning. If ECSC falls under the memo, under the executive order that came out, or if it falls under the Office of Great Start. And early on, ECSC, as well as GSRP, all fall in that preview of not specifically being called out in 2020-35.
All right, so going back to that executive order, I'm sure all of you have taken a look at it, or if you haven't, here are the 10 areas that it addressed, all of them having to do with education. And so item number 1, you know that there has been a suspension of in-person instruction. We're going to talk today about the continuity of learning plans, assessment, special education, and suspension of some requirements that are part of our day-to-day work. All right, so let me just get right into that. And let's talk about continuity of learning plans. I think most of you are neck deep in this right now, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think it's the work you're doing. They had to be submitted by beginning April the 8th. And again, the guidance that they are providing through MDE is in collaboration with MAISA and also the Charter Schools Authority. So they're working together to come up with this information, and all of them together are saying, make sure, again, it's one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning, that these continuity of learning plans are student-centered, that they're providing equity and access of learning to all learners. And the last thing is monitoring for progress and future need. When we say monitoring for progress and future need, keep that in mind because that's something that desperately has to be documented. And I think in special education, we are used to that. But as time goes on, we'll talk a little bit more about that documentation piece. The other things that I think there have been some misunderstanding about, we just want to add a few seconds of clarity to that, is that your continuity of learning plan is to cover children who have additional needs. So your second language learners, your children with 504 plans, and indeed your children with IEPs, their needs must be addressed in your continuity of learning plan. Those all, of course, go up to your ISD in a PDF form, and the ISD then submits them to the state. So the time that the ISD will actually be submitting a plan on its own is when, and most ISDs are doing this, are serving center-based children in center-based programs. And so they are then saying how they are going to meet those needs for students in center-based programs. All right. So let's go on from there. And the continuity plan is important for a couple of different, one other reason, well, many reasons. They have to be in effect no later than April the 28th of this month. That's this month. And the thing you should know is that once you start with your continuity of learning plan, all of us know that our timelines in special education are measured in school days. So when you put your continuity of learning plan into effect, that essentially starts your school days. Hopefully that makes sense to you, but your continuity of learning plan will be the measure of school days for timelines. All right. So I highlighted this word right up at the top, contingency learning plans, because contingency are different than continuity. And I will tell you that the first couple times I read through the guidance on this, I had to go back and forth and back and forth. A contingency learning plan is really an individualized plan for students who have special needs. And there is not a requirement for this, but everyone is encouraged to have a contingency learning plan for children who have IEPs. Michigan in particular, other states have done this differently, but just so you know, Michigan is saying the contingency learning plan does not require prior written notice, it does not require consent, it requires collaboration with families, and that and we talked about this earlier, but the child's most recent IEP is really the reflection of fate in Michigan, right? It is one way of documenting the district's good faith effort of providing supports and access for children with IEPs. So we move on from there, and as we look at this, the documentation of how you're meeting needs for children is a requirement. And it's something that will show your good faith efforts, will show the child's need or not, or the child needing or not needing compensatory ed. All this documentation is part of the work that you're doing at this point. Again, as people that are working in special education, this is not new language, but I just want to emphasize once again so that we can talk with providers about that the documentation they do is going to be part of that trail that we look at for good faith, for compensatory ed, or whatever else that the child may need. All right. So the contingency learning plan is one way in which we document that. There's other ways in which we do it as well. Let me do a quick, see if I can be skillful enough to make this switch. And if I can, it'll be awesome. So I'm going to share this one, but I'm actually going to go over here. So MAISA has actually come out with this document. Can you nod your head if you're seeing this at this point? Did I successfully switch?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Yeah. Good. So MAISA has actually come out with this document that helps us. And starting right up at the top, it's what's going on. So if you are just documenting your good faith effort, CASE has actually given you a sample of that. We really are kind of in this era right now. Most districts are now looking at using contingency learning plans or some way of documenting how they're providing specialized instruction to children with IEPs. Again, the contingency learning plan is one way of doing that, but there should be some documentation about how you are providing access and how you're providing specialized support or specialized instruction to children with IEPs. Ottawa and some others have been good enough to have their forms be used as just models. So if you want to, we are going to send you this document at the end as well, and you can actually take a look at that and say, hey, is this what we've got as part of our work as well? All right, so let me get back to my PowerPoint at this point, if I can. Oops, right up here. See if I got back there successfully. I did not. Hang on just for a second. There we go. Seen it again? We back to the file folders?
Yes.
We're actually seeing your note. I am seeing your notes.
Yep.
You're seeing my notes.
Yeah. Can you put it in slideshow mode?
Try this one instead. How about that one? Is that better?
There you go.
That's
Perfect.
better.
There we go.
Thanks.
Okay. Takes a village to do PowerPoint online, doesn't it?
It does.
All right, so let's talk about putting this all into effect. One of the memos that did come out was regarding professional development. And many of you probably already know that professional development has been waived for the remainder of this school year for teacher certification, for school social workers. The reason we want to talk about that today is because although it has been waived, it is probably one of the things that you will still continue to use, because as you implement distance learning or continuity learning plans, you're probably going to want to spend some time helping and supporting teachers to do that, and professional development is a way in which you will do it. So just so you know that we have got a memo dated April the 9th, so it's fairly fresh, that there's no longer the requirement to meet those clock hours. That does not mean that you may not use professional development to move forward with distance learning. The other thing is this document that came out from the state of Michigan. It's a pretty comprehensive document on distance learning, 20-some pages long. And if you have not seen it, we're going to send out a full list of links, hyperlinks, when we're done today. And I'd encourage you to get on there and take a look at some of the guidance that state of Michigan is giving to distance learning. All right. This is the piece that I think we want to spend most of our time on, and it came out on April the 10th, and it really came out with a memo from Dr. K, and talking about how we can implement, it's the guidance around IDEA and MARS, and how are we going to go forward with this. All right, so why don't we jump right into it and move forward with how it applies to kids who are preschool age, because I think that's really why we're on the call today, is to talk specifically about that population. And so we're going to talk about different scenarios and different requirements based upon or for that age group. All right. So the first one is initial evaluations and timelines that are associated with them. Remember, your school days are based upon your learning plan, continuity of learning plan, and it still is a 30-day requirement. So that requirement is still there. You are being guided in that document to use an agreement to extend evaluation timelines if you need to have face-to-face evaluation or if parents are requesting to wait. But the caution, the caveat on that one is you may not use that in a boilerplate way or just say, well, every child that comes in and needs to have evaluation at this point, we're going to do an extension on. If you have enough information for this child to move forward with the evaluation, you should do so. But the agreement to extend timelines, I think most of you have in your systems at this point and would be using that. For those children that you do not go forward with evaluation at that point, but suspect a disability, you should be using a contingency learning plan to support those children in the meantime, even though they don't have established eligibility for special education. So they would be served much like children who have been found eligible with an IEP, but you're going to be using a contingency learning plan to do that. So here's the piece that I think many are concerned about, whether or not you're going to get corrective actions on these, or whether or not you're going to get a cap. Right now, what that guidance is saying is that you will not be getting corrective actions, but you will be getting data alerts. So these records are still going to be going through MSDS in the same way, and it'll come up in Catamaran for you to look at, and you will see that you will actually have children that fell outside the 30-day timeline. And at that point, from what we're hearing, we were just on a call yesterday, at that point you would have the chance to respond and say, we missed that timeline due to COVID. We missed that timeline due to COVID. And so this is in print at this point, and guidance from MDE and OS that data alerts are what you will be getting. All right, let's move on from there. And this is one that has been, I think, on the forefront, I know for Lisa and myself, and for most people that are both in Part C and Part B. And I guess what I would like to highlight first off, because it adds clarity to it, is that a child moving from Part C to Part B is actually an initial, right? It's an initial evaluation, even though the child has, even for those children that have MMSE eligibility back at Part C, that does not jump the wall with them, as we say in the field. And so we must establish initial eligibility. But think back now to what we were talking about for initial evaluations for the general population. It's true for these kids as well. So you're going to use the read, and that is the first stopping point to see what data you have. The good news is that for many children in Part C who already have had services, and most of those who have MMSE services, you already have some nice data that you can look at. I think there is some flexibility that's been talked about in terms of that window of data, but please make sure you use the read to determine if you have enough to determine eligibility at that point and say, I can go forward saying this child is eligible, and no further face-to-face is needed. One of the things that we are getting guidance on, actually it's on the next call that Lisa was talking about nationally, is that we're going to be given some guidance on testing and evaluation that can be done remotely. And we will get back to you with information that we get from that call in terms of what sort of testing can be done in a valid and reliable way from a distance, I guess I would say. All right. There is, again, going to be no exception to the requirement for timely transition, and you will be receiving a data alert, and it will be handled much the same way as the initial evaluation was.
So
right.
Mark, there's a couple questions in the chat. Can I stop you for just a minute?
Absolutely.
So a lot of them I've been, some of them I've been answering as we go, but I'm going to open these couple up for you. What is the obligation regarding child fine during this period? So either you or Lisa could respond.
How about if I let Lisa, Lisa, you're comfortable with grabbing that one a minute?
Do we have a slide on it though?
We do not.
Not on child fine.
No.
Do you want to take that one back, or?
I think we probably, sorry, I just asked Lisa if she wanted to hand.
No, Mark, go ahead. I hand it to you, go ahead.
Okay, so we have not gotten guidance on child fined at this point, other than initial evaluations. So I think that is one of the things we will have to take back and ask for the guidance on. I will go back and double check, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing in there that talks about child fined at this point.
So and I don't know at the national level, again, their thing has been to do your best, but as far as the requirements, because right now there's some things that there's not going to be, there's a lot of flexibility that's being given at the national level, but there's some things that aren't. And with child fine, I know it's do your best, but even from a national perspective, I don't think we've had to find an answer. So I think Mark and I had to take that back both to the state level as well as to the national level. So
Right.
stay
So the
tuned
next-
for that response.
So the next question, just to clarify, even though the MDE document was only for K-12, we still follow that guidance for 3 to 5.
This is actually, the guidance that we're talking about today is actually part of the MDE OS guidance that came out, and it speaks specifically to these topics. So this is guidance that has been given, and yes, you do follow this because it came from MDE and OS. And we'll give you the link to that document so you have it as well. But it's the April 10 document that we're referencing at this point. So I think you have good standing to move forward with this.
So another question regarding your timelines. Does our timeline follow the ISD's continuity of learning plan approved date or the LEA's approval date?
LEAs. I'm sorry, we'll probably have to take that back for more clarity, but that's always been the way before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the child find question was referring to those 3 to 5 referrals made by parents. So just so you're aware of that.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alyssa, for clarifying that.
Yeah, and let us go back and take a double look, and you can do so as well once you have this document. It may speak to that because everything that it's talking about, I shouldn't say everything, most of the things that are being talked about in there speak directly to that. There is no waiving of rights at all to a child or a family as we move forward with this. In fact, I do want to highlight that. I think Lisa and I both talked about that a great deal, and it's on the national calls all the time. During this time of COVID, we are not waiving requirements. In fact, that has come right down from federal. We are not waiving requirements. We're looking for flexibilities within requirements. So the rights and procedural safeguards that students had prior to COVID, they still have. So we are just looking for ways in which we can have flexibilities or alternative ways of meeting those requirements. That being said, I'm sure all of us are sitting around going, so what does flexibility look like? And that's pretty much a regulation by regulation coming out in probably not as fast as we would like it to. But that being said, I know people are working night and day to get that to us. So, all right, ready to move forward, or is there other questions?
Oh, we're good to move forward for a while.
Okay, good. So here's other thoughts on transition. Again, you can have an extended timeline. And again, just like an initial, if you are to a point where you think, boy, I do need to have face-to-face evaluation or assessment for this child, use a contingency learning plan to give this child the supports that you believe he or she needs until we can get the evaluation done. All right? Hopefully that makes sense to you. And I love the fact that this actually comes down focused first on the needs of children and families. It's just saying, you know, even though we can't get our work done at the level that we want it to be, and we will do it in the future, my goodness, yes, we will, we still want to make sure that we have kids and families' needs met. And so I think this is a really nice indication of that flexibility and student and family focus that has been talked about already. All right, annual IEPs, annual reviews of IEPs. I think it's a bit easier in most cases to have these. We are still talking about how to get, so an annual, you don't need to have a signature on that, but again, parent signature. But again, it is one of those things that you do want to work in a collaborative way with families, and that was highlighted in the document, both from OS and much of the guidance from OSEP. Move forward collaborating with families and make all reasonable efforts to hold that IEP. Here's what I think is going to be important to remember is that as you write that IEP, you are going to write it as if COVID does not exist. And that's a dream for all of us, is it not? But you are going to do your program start and end dates, and you're going to have it start when the last IEP was done, and you're going to have it go for a year. And you're going to write your offer of FAPE based upon a typical school year, again, as if COVID-19 were not part of our world. All right, so this is one of those few times where your IEP can actually be your dream world because COVID does not exist in that instance. right? Your IEP, once again, is going to be your offer of faith to that family. And you may want to use that time then to develop the contingency learning plan to say, in the meantime, because we can't give you everything that's on this offer of faith, we're going to do everything we possibly can, and here's our contingency learning plan, right? Hopefully that makes sense to you, but if there's questions, toss those up in the chat box. And again, the data alerts, I think we've kind of gone over that. And so I'm not going to harp on that. I just put on each slide that we talk about so that you will know that that is part of the guidance that we're being given by OS. All right. So reevaluation is the other. And reevaluation, I don't know that that's as big of a concern for a 3 to 5 population, but it is indeed a concern. And so you're once again going to go back to your read process, and you're going to say, what do we know about this child, and what do we still need to know? So your review of existing evaluation data, right? There are going to be those times where you look and go, oh my word, we do need face-to-face evaluation for this child. And so when that's needed, the evaluation would need to be delayed. But again, you'll see bullet number 2, in those instances where it is delayed, you are going to put into effect a contingency learning plan. So the contingency learning plan is this buffer for children with special needs that we can continue to provide them what they need during this time until we can get back to business as what we would call normal. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. The other thing that is being said is that ECDD, I don't believe this necessarily applies to people on this call as much, but as children get to that age where they're aging out of ECDD, just know that as they turn 8, you're not going to say, well, guess what, you just aged out of supports. You're going to hold off on that unless you can go ahead with your read and say, well, we have enough data, but they're not going to lose eligibility as it were, but you're probably going to move forward using a contingency learning plan. All right, data alerts, we've already talked about that, so I won't harp on that any more than having a statement on here. So we've been talking about electronic consent, and I was just talking about, and some of you were on a call earlier today where we were talking about what does electronic consent look like. And just so you know, there was guidance even as far back as 2016 that OSIP came out and said electronic signature, electronic consent is allowable. I think where we're struggling right now quite a bit, based upon what others are telling me from the field, is so how do we get that? And I think, again, this is one of those things that all the guidance that we are getting is telling us to do your best. Do your best, and if you can get an email from a parent's email account that says, hey, we agree and consent, use that. So it's going to take a lot of different ways for you to document consent at this point, but moving forward with good faith, I think is where we want to be with this one. Lisa, anything more that I'm not thinking about on this one that we've talked about already in calls?
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay. All right. So progress reporting is the next piece, IEP, the progress on goals and objectives. And your IEP really being your offer fate is going to determine how often you have to report on progress on goals and objectives. For the most part, as we all know, you have to report at least as often as general education peers. I don't know that that's used typically for a 3 to 5 year population, only because we don't have that general education peer population that we can say, hey, here's how often they're getting that. So most often we'll see three times a year or something like that. That's going to be what you are held to in terms of your best efforts at this point, right? We're going to go, I guess I'd like to go back and say, remember that this documentation is not just for documentation's sake, but is something we'll reflect back on as we look forward to what are the needs in the future. That's how an IEP has always been, and that's how it's going to be used for IEPs, compensatory ed, and other things. All right. So compensatory ed is one of those things that is being talked about quite a bit at this point. And I know that MDE has got a particular guidance document, and the guidance we are being given in the times of COVID is right now focus on just providing services and supports in the best way you can for this child. Compensatory ed is really something you're going to determine at the other end of this process, because you're really going to have to look for the adverse impact of what's happened for this child because they were not being given all the supports and services in the same way as they were during a regular school year. So it's going to be case by case. MDE has already said that, and that's the way the regulatory language reads. And that, again, I think I've already talked about the whole timing, that it's best reviewed and determined when districts and students return to normal operations. At that point, you're going to say, hey, so what's happened? What's happened and what do we need to do for this student? It is not a one-size-fits-all, and it is not something that all students get. Just so you know, at the federal level, Lisa and I have been on calls where they are talking about whether or not compensatory education is exactly what we're going to do, or if it's going to be extended school year services. Compensatory ed, as many of you know, has got a connotation of that the district did something wrong or willfully withheld something from a student, and so owes compensatory ed to a child. And that's what's been the conversation nationally, is that will this be compensatory ed or will it be extended school year? What is it we're going to do for these children? And at the national level, they are saying, hold on for more guidance. At the state level, as I've said, you may want to review the compensatory ed guidance that MDE is giving. I think that's the direction that we are leaning, and the latest document has indicated. All right, so hopefully that didn't add too much confusion, but just know that we're in a position right now where we're saying, let's figure that out at a later point, but just knowing that there's likely going to be some additional services given to children that have been without educational supports at the intensity they need over this period. All right, so let me click on to the next one. And I think some of the questions that have been given to OS and have gone up through MDE OS is, what can we pay for with IDA funds? Excess costs, again, as usual, and those excess costs related to supplies and technology are reimbursable. And to support professional development for people that are approved to provide special education supports. And we are still waiting for further guidance because from OSEP, I'm sorry, on maintenance of effort, further guidance on excess cost, and then proportionate share for children that are in private school settings. So hold on most of that, but knowing that the cost associated with technology, instruction, and training of special education personnel are reimbursable costs. Okay. So on the 13th, we got the latest. I mean, even today, we were just talking about there's more information that just came out from MDE, from MDE on child care centers. Well, it wasn't MDE. More guidance on an executive order, sorry, on child care centers, and I think it's nursing care. So
yes, there's 2020-50, and then child care is 2020-51.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is not to show you that I'm not keeping on top of every executive order that comes down, because we certainly are trying to do that, but that we are living in these times that are changing very quickly. And I think that's why our point of reference cannot be that we've got it right and it's going to be right going forward in every instance, but we're going to do our best work and our best effort at staying abreast with these things. The most recent memo from Dr. Rice, our state superintendent, highlights really 4 significant areas, and I think all of us that are doing this work are familiar with those. Today we talked about those 2 highlighted ones, learning at a distance and special education guidance. Many of you, even before that, were talking about school nutrition. I know I've got some good friends that have been talking about getting lunches to their population, social emotional learning and health as well. And then you see the additional areas that are covered by this memo. I think this is one that you probably won't want to miss because every one of the items in this memo regarding early on, Head Start, childcare, Great Start Readiness Program are all hyperlinked back to guidance that are provided around them. So the one that I don't know that I touched on, so I do want to do that because we've had some questions about it, is this one right down here, assessment. And I don't want to talk about it from this memo standpoint, but people have asked about whether or not the assessment waivers that we are getting for all those ESSA required statewide assessments apply to child outcomes. So they're saying, well, that seems like it's an assessment. Does that apply to child outcomes? And let's just bring you up to speed on that. The waiver does actually cover only that assessment, which is part of ESSA. Some states have made their child outcomes part of ESSA, but Michigan has not. So the child outcomes are still required. It is a results indicator, as you know, and I think we are expecting to perhaps see a dip in your results on that one for the upcoming year. That's not going to be alarming, but as always, the guidance that has come down from MDE is get as many done as you can with information that is valid and reliable. So just to let you know, the child outcomes requirement, your B7 indicator, is not waived at this point. All right, hopefully that makes sense to you, those of you that are doing 3 to 5 services.
Yeah, there was a question earlier about that, Mark, so thanks for addressing it.
Okay, all right. All right, so I'm going to go on to this next slide, and I'm going to try my hand at working collaboratively with Nancy because she's going to talk us through some of the resources that we have out there for you as we move forward. So let's see if I can get there. I'm not there yet. Got too many windows open.
You seem to be, oh yeah, you're on the PowerPoint still.
Yeah, I'm on the PowerPoint still, am I not?
So while Mark's changing screens, we're going to walk through a little bit of the Office of Innovative Projects website and where you can find some of these resources on that website. We did have a question in the chat box about will there be additional training offered for COAST for new staff that can tap into this spring, possibly online. We do have an online COAST training on the Office of Innovative Projects website that you can take and you can have new staff take. It's very thorough. It walks through the process and it's very nicely done. So that is available online. I also know that Jean and Mark are looking at possibly putting together an online around local data, but we haven't gotten to the point of having that complete yet. So be aware that that might be coming soon. The next question, is it recommended to process transfer students admission to place as we typically would when the school is face-to-face?
Yeah, there actually is guidance in the document on that. I don't want to speak in too much detail on that at this point because I did not give that the attention perhaps it was due. But from what I can tell, yes, transfer replacement is still in effect as a child comes in. Let us get back to you on that, but take a look in the April 10th guidance because it does actually speak to transfer replacement for children.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can you go back one page because this is the page that we end on when I did the test. So if you could go back to all projects.
Oh, okay, sure.
That's okay.
And while you do that, I want to, Jill had a question about in terms of the day and hour requirement for ECSE. Is it the same for K-12 and that the hours have been waived so that the day requirement is 144 days? So specifically speaking to Mars Rule 1754, a recommendation has been made to the Department of Ed regarding to follow similar suit for what's in the executive order. But at this point in time, there's not been a decisive answer. We've not heard back with that recommendation. So details will come out once that has been determined, but a recommendation was to waive the hours, but not the days. But as of right now, that is not in place for preschool special ed.
Thank you, Lisa. Mark, can you refresh one more time? It's taking us to the ECSN page, and so I want to take us to the home page. Maybe go to home in the black bar.
Right there?
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, it's better. Okay. So the screen that you see right now is our homepage, the Office of Innovative Projects website. When you go to eotta.ccresa.org, this is what the page that you will land on. You will want to sign in, or if you're not a user, subscribe as a user so that you can take different trainings and get alerts about things that are going on. To find the resources that Mark is referencing today, you'll notice up in the top, you're in the All Projects filter right now, and we're going to go to the Preschool Special Education tab. And you'll notice upcoming events and different things happening there. And next, you're going to go over to the right-hand side. And the right-hand side, you'll see Preschool Special Education News. And below that, you will see GSRP and Preschool Special Education COVID-19 resources right under Pre-K Special Education Resources. Keep going down, right there. Yep. And I click that link and you will find in that particular section resources for preschool special education as well as GSRP, COVID guidance and resources. Now within each of the folders, there are resources from that particular organization or related to that particular topic. You'll notice we have the Center for Disease Control, MDE related announcements, Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education. I'll probably shorten that down just so it says OS so you can find it easier. A couple things I've added today is your professional learning resources. So there's a lot of resources in there about providing distance learning, as well as possibly services through a tele-intervention process. Also social emotional health. And right now the resources in there really revolve around childcare providers and families. Be getting some more in there that'll be around students as well. But you can find lots of different resources on this page for you to reference if that's something that you need to do. Okay, I'm noticing a question in the chat. Could Lisa repeat the information on 1754 hours days requirement?
So to repeat that, for 1754, there's been a recommendation made to the department that for, again, just for 1754, that there would be a waiving of the hour requirement, which is consistent with the waiver of hours of instruction under the executive order, but it would maintain the school day requirement. At this point, it's just a recommendation that has not gone into effect. So it's still in discussion.
So one other thing about the resource page, all of these resources are also on the GSRP page of our website. So if you wear a couple different hats, you'll see these same resources for your GSRP program. And Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
How about if we go right on to Lisa?
Lisa,
and she
okay.
can talk about I think I'm not sharing the right thing. Are you seeing the screen,
We're
Lisa?
the landing page for Office of Innovative Projects.
Okay, let me see if I can get back there.
So there's a comment in the chat, I believe related to what Lisa just said, and that could be problematic as we are not meeting every day with students, even in elementary. So just so you're aware, Lisa, as you take that back.
And I will take that additional feedback. Thanks, Lydia. So as Mark's navigating the screen, as I mentioned, and Mark and I mentioned earlier, that we are involved in the National TA, not just weekly calls, but any information that's coming out federally, nationally. Mark and I are in the emails for it. And the one resource that's really helpful is to, in addition to going to the EOTTA or Office of Innovative Projects website, because all that information is linked here as well, but to go to ectacenter.org. This is the most up-to-date federally for anything related to COVID, anything that's happening, with some great resources. So here's the landing page for ECTA. And Mark, if you go to under See Also in this center, the tele-intervention and distance learning, yep. And just kind of scroll. If you have an opportunity just to look for some resources, I'm always amazed by what they have, not just education with your traditional classroom, but also for therapists and specialists, how they're thinking outside of the box, offering tele-intervention and distance learning to their students and their children. But again, there's so many resources here, and anything up to date, everything is most up to date. And this is updated, gosh, a couple times a day. Yeah. Like, let's look at this. This was updated today at 8:21 a.m. So I just recommend taking time to check out the resources, because maybe some of these are something you'd want to include in your continuity of learning plans.
So a question in the chat box, could you clarify the due dates for the contingency plans?
At this point, I don't know that we have clarification on that. It's really about, because they are not required, they are recommended. It's just a matter of how are you going to be providing specialized instruction and access to those students who have IEPs. So if you have another way of doing a contingency learning plan or providing that same documentation, it should start at the same time that you start supports and services for children in general education. That's equity right there.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? All right, I think I'm going to be able to go back to.
We've got some conversation happening between participants, which is good.
I like the support.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're at the point in our presentation, we're almost out of time today. So if there are additional questions you have or that we didn't get to, that you were looking for answers on, can you type those in the chat now so that we can take those back with us and get some answers?
There is one, Nancy, that's come up that we haven't addressed, and it's child outcomes. So give me a quick second.
Mark, I think Mark addressed child outcomes a bit when he was talking about assessment.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Thanks.
Okay, are you seeing are we back to the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think I kind of said some of this, but what questions might you still have? What additional clarification might you need? If you can type those in the chat box. The other question that we are wondering is, would regular meetings be helpful to bring you the updated guidance for ECSE that might be out, that is out there as it comes out, and maybe some networking sessions to see how other people are doing things and share ideas. So if you would like regular meetings, just type yes or yes please in the chat box, and we will look at what that need is, and then again, additional questions, and we will take those back.
And it looks like everyone's saying yes, with pleases and thank yous. Thanks, Lisa.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can even let us know what frequency we want. As we move forward with this, we were really trying to be very respectful of the amount of work that everybody has on their plates. So we don't want to call you together for things that you feel like, oh my gosh, I got something else more pressing right now. But we do want to be responsive to your needs. So let us know what kind of frequency works for you as well, if you can provide us with that. And then when we get done here, we're going to try and summarize all those questions. We will send out the resources and links to you that we talked about today, and we'll send you out a copy of a PDF of these slides. So hopefully you will have most of the guidance that you need, or at least that is available at this point. So,
Elaine had one quick question before we head out about child outcome reporting. And if staff are not able to complete the assessment to submit, do they just not report it, or is there a way to indicate COVID-19 as the reason? At this point, even federally, we're working to see, because outcomes isn't just a Michigan thing, it's in everything. It's not a compliance, it's the results. But so that's a question that we've posted up to OSUP for clarification on. So stay tuned on that. The guidance that we have right now is to do your best to complete it, whatever information you have, because the COSUP process is a 4-part process. If you have data enough that you feel comfortable filling out the COSUP form, parent input could be done by phone. Just really encouraging to complete it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's our most recent guidance from OSUP.
Yep. So I'm looking at the clock, and I guess first thing I think we all want to say is thank you so much for making time for this today. And we really want to support you and your work as much as possible. So reach out with emails if you have questions. There's many of you that we've worked with directly, and we seriously want to help you as we work through this together. And let us know of your questions in the chat. We're going to be getting back with you on those. And Nancy or Lisa, what else?
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
for your
everyone
time.
for being on today.
All right. So we will let you go. I'll leave this open for just a few minutes so that you can type in any further questions you have. And then we're going to copy that chat. So I probably am not going to close it out too quickly.
No, but you can stop recording.
Yeah, well, you overestimate my abilities.